Good evening, fight fans. We are back. I am Nick Peralta, your host of MMA Fight Night Live, here with founder of the Paige site. Everything good about this place, Joe Devlin. What's up, man?
Not much, man. How's the quarantine life been?
Oh, it's been great for my beard. It's But yeah, man, it's been a few weeks. We're finally back, and man, do we have a crazy card to talk about. Finally, Fight Island is coming. It's this Saturday, and we got a lot to talk about, so we'll just jump right into it. First of all, I'm very excited about this card. There's a lot of underrated fighters on it. There's a lot of fun fights that maybe are definitely flying in under the radar, and we have a stacked main card. We'll just generally be talking about the main card, but I can't tell you guys enough that this undercard is pretty decorated. It's very international, just like Dana White wanted it to be. Of course, we've had all these events at the Apex in the United States, and traveling because of coronavirus has been very, very difficult to come by. So for the purpose of getting more of his international talent paid, we now have Fight Island. So first off, what have you thought about the Apex situation real quick before we jump into this main card? What have you thought about them doing that as a whole, and how do you think it's performed just as a system so far for the UFC?
Well, I mean, it's been great so far. The fights have been phenomenal. I know that there's stats to kind of prove for and against this, but I think the 25-foot cage does make a difference. There seems to be a lot more action, seems to be a lot more finishes. And, you know, when you figure these are, for the most part, you know, we'll call mid-level, maybe low-tier guys looking to kind of still make a name for themselves. Everyone seems to be really getting after it. There's been some really exciting fights. And if you think about it, if you go from the beginning of the Jacksonville cards when this all first started coming back around till now, I mean, this 3-month stretch or so, 2-month stretch? 2-month stretch, I think. Like, the fights have been phenomenal, like much better than I thought they would be. So I'm all for it. I'm hoping that the trend continues in Abu Dhabi. And yeah, what about you?
I've loved it. Yeah, just share a lot of the same sentiments. I think that the cage does make a difference. It makes you wonder if maybe that's a permanent switch they should go to. Probably won't, but you know, and I'm sure there's some fighters that feel like, yes, do it, don't do it. So I'm sure that the fighters themselves, that community, is overall split on it. So based on that alone, I think that'd make it too hard for them to do like as a permanent change. But I love it, and yeah, I believe it's there's a lot of reasoning behind that, and I would love to like do like a Q&A one day, just talk about it. It'd be great. By the way, this video is sponsored by nobody. I will be drinking this Dr. Pepper periodically.
I got this McDonald's
cup for that. So just don't mind that. Let's jump into this main card. UFC 251. Now, before we even get to that, we do have a switched up main event on 6 days' notice. Jorge Masvidal jumping in for Gilbert Burns, who unfortunately got hit with the Rona. He will not be fighting. And just hopefully he gets better ASAP. Generally, athletes or people in really good physical condition have been able to survive COVID-19, having, you know, a really good physical, you know, system. Just being fit, being healthy. That's a real. I mean, if you have that going into it, your chances are you'll come out okay. So all hopes are that Gilbert Burns will be fine. He'll recover and he'll be back soon to fight the winner of this fight. Like I said, the prelims are great. Can't wait to see them. The main card, though, we kick it off with a women's flyweight fight. Amanda Ariba takes on the returning Paige Vanzant. Paige Vanzant finally coming back from a litany of injuries, mainly to her arm. She's broken it several times over the course of her career. She's taken on a gal in Ribas who has been dangerous. She has big wins over Marcos, and most importantly, Mackenzie Dern gave Mackenzie Dern her very first loss, and is 3-0 in the UFC. Definitely has the kind of trajectory right now to pay attention to, and I think Paige Vanzant makes sense as an opponent. So I very much dig this fight. And Paige Vanzant, I just want to make sure I'm getting this right, last defeated Rachel Ostovich last year in January by armbar and is 1-1 at flyweight so far, losing to Jessica Rose Clark in her divisional debut. I like this fight. Stylistically, it makes sense. It's going to show us where Paige Vanzant is. Amanda Ribas is, like I said, on a fun trajectory upwards, and this is a good test for her. She's definitely fought some of the best in strawweight. And in flyweight, it makes sense to see where Paige Vanzant is, giving her an up and comer. I like this matchup very much. It's also important to point out too that this is Paige Vanzant's final fight on her contract. That's been one of the main stories for her coming into this fight card, and I'm sure she's going to want to take that win and see what free agency has for her, as she stated in the past. I like this fight. What do you got?
Yeah, I agree with most of the points you mentioned. It is the final fight in her contract. She's already come out multiple times in the last few weeks talking about the pay that she's made from Dancing with the Stars and, whatever she's gotten from, from people sponsoring her. It eclipses what she makes in the UFC. So here's the thing. I think win or lose, this will be Paige's last fight in the UFC. I don't think that she's going to get the money she feels she deserves. I think that the money that she's probably looking for would be reserved for, the Shevchenkos and the Weili Zhangs and that tier of fighters. I don't put Paige in that tier, even if she does beat Ribas. Also, keep in mind her husband fights for Bellator. Bellator has no problem allowing their fighters to keep sponsors, walk out with the gear. I'm sure Paige can make a lot more money than the $5,000 or whatever it is she's getting from Reebok to do that. And I think that, in all honesty, the talent at flyweight in Bellator is more on par with where she is. I think that if she can go to Bellator and pick up a win or two, she can, get a title shot right away. I think they're going to do a better job of pushing her as, an entertainer and her personality itself. I don't like this fight for Paige. I believe they tried to make this fight, if I'm not mistaken, last year as well, against the same opponent. I could be wrong on that, but I think that they were trying to book her some point earlier, either in Brazil earlier this year or last year, maybe on the Uruguay show or something like that.
We're supposed to fight her in March of this year, but then that's when she hurt her arm.
But yeah, right. Again, but I think even before that, I think they were trying to push her into that fight in like the fall or something. Either way, I think this is much more about the UFC trying to push Ribas and try and get her a win over Paige Vanzant, a known commodity, and try and build her up.
I think you're confusing Ribas with Poliana Botelho.
Oh, is that who she was to be?
Yeah, okay. Like days before that fight fell out because of she hurt her arm.
Okay. Yeah. Regardless, I think the UFC is really using this fight to kind of get Ribas over the hill, try and get her a win over a name that they can then use to kind of catapult her into a top 10, maybe top 5 opponent type deal. So, we'll see how Paige does. It's not outside of the realm of possibility for her to win, but she is the biggest underdog on the entire card. She's either 8 or 9 to 1 right now.
Word.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ribas is at least.
What?
Yeah, she's a massive favorite. So I mean, I wouldn't say, in my opinion, it's a little overstated. I'd say she'd be more like a 4 to 5 to 1 favorite. But either way, it's an uphill climb for sure. I'm wishing her nothing but the best. But with what I've seen from Ribas and the tools she possesses, I think it could be a long night for Paige.
Agreed. My final thoughts on this would be that I think if Ribas wins, I think it's important to note that this is in the flyweight division, and not to knock it, but this is one of the weaker divisions.
Yeah.
Name-wise that exist in the UFC. Talent-wise is also kind of argumentative here. So I think they need a decent name to push forward. And the winner of this fight, I'm sure they want to keep on tap ready to push further. I do agree with you though that Bellator probably is the better fit for someone like Paige, especially given this point in her career. Not that she's older, but she's been around, and she's she's a veteran for sure. Like, she has that status, I would say, despite not competing an overly abundant amount of times. She's fought a lot of the best of the best. So I think it's important. I think for her it'll be a matter of who wins. If she wins in exciting fashion. And if she loses, then she's probably out of there. I mean, why? Because after that, you're not going to get the money you want, and you can test the free agency, and Bellator will still probably give you some kind of contract that you'd be more than happy with than what you got right now. Plus, you got sponsors, and then you'd be in the same promotion with, is that her husband?
Yeah, her husband.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think if she loses, she'll go. If she wins in really exciting fashion, maybe the UFC will budge a little bit. We'll see. But otherwise, still a very fun fight on paper. We move on to the next one. This one is in the women's strawweight division. It is a rematch of one of the craziest finishes from a title fight I can recall in the last couple of years. Jessica Andrade, former champion, taking on the woman she beat to win the title, Rose Namajunas, other former champion. This is a fun rematch, I think, and I like that it's 3 rounds. I think it kind of, not that it really favors anybody, but I feel like that's the kind of fight that Andrade would like, and it really will push Rose Namajunas to push a more detailed strategy, I feel, in this fight. I love this fight. I'm excited to see Rose Namajunas back. We have not seen her since that fight, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. That we remember in that first fight, and to my recollection, I felt like Rose was winning it. She was using her striking. She was getting out of the way of Jessica's worst shot or best shots, and outpointing her to a sense. She wasn't doing like an abundance of damage, but she was, from my eyes, from what I can recall, definitely winning the fight until Andrade was able to secure a clinch, put her against the cage. Again, I'm just remembering this from memory, but I remember that Rose was trying to utilize a Kimura to try and advance positioning off from the cage, and Andrade just used her freak strength to pick her up and slam her down onto her head to win the title. It was an interesting fight, and so it's going to be even more interesting to see how Rose looks coming back. What if at all Jessica tries to change up in this fight? What do you think?
Yeah, I rewatched the first fight, and it kind of went the way that I remembered it. Rose was very much like the Matador, and she was letting Jessica Andrade come forward, and then Rose was like peppering her, get out of the way, right? Counter, get out of the way, counter, get out of the way. And Andrade a couple times attempted to get that double leg takedown, and each time Rose would, reach over the top and then secure the Kimura grip, and that was to try and avoid being slammed, because it's just puts you in a weird position if you're the offensive wrestler going to try and pick someone up. And she did get dropped a couple times, but it was kind of like a light drop. It wasn't like that final one that thudded her on her head. So it's just that, she went to the well one too many times with that. And, when you have both your arms tied up, it leaves you super vulnerable. But up until that point, it was 100% Rose's fight. She was much, much, much better on the feet. I believe she's the taller, longer opponent as well, which serves to her favor. I really think that Rose is going to have a solid showing. I expect her to win this fight. I think it'll go the distance, being that it's a 3-round fight. But if she can just avoid some of those power clinch, power slam, Andrade's got that like tractor strength. If she can kind of avoid some of those weird clinch situations, I think it should be, her fight to win for sure.
Yeah, I like this fight. It should be interesting, entertaining. I feel like both of these women's fights are fun openers before getting to our triple header of sorts, where we will find out who will become the new UFC bantamweight champion. The first title of which on this card being from Russia's Petr. I hope I said that right. I might not have.
I never know either.
Yeah. It's like I gotta ask somebody, Google or somebody to like sound it out, and then they'll just break the internet. But there's Petr versus Jose Aldo, the former featherweight king, has dropped down since to bantamweight. It's been a point of controversy that Aldo gets this fight, right? And I remember Cejudo made a very interesting point when he showed up on Joe Rogan's podcast last month, where he stated, "It's my fault that Jose Aldo got this fight." He called out Jose Aldo and wanted that fight and was otherwise scheduled to get it, but pulled out. And that's why Dominic Cruz eventually got the title shot that he got against him. Yeah. And so it's, I guess from a certain perspective, it looks bad to just give Jose the title shot, and then just take it away, right? Just after the fact. So that is really, as far as Cejudo's point of view is concerned, why Jose is still getting this fight. But either way, it's gonna be an interesting fight. I mean, Jose Aldo didn't look bad necessarily against Moraes after a fight that he's on paper lost, but I really think it's going to be a fun showing for the Russian here. He's younger, he's hungrier, he's a mean fighter. He's on a crazy winning streak. Let's see what he's on a 9-fight winning streak. He's looked better than most guys in the division, and bantamweight has been incredibly exciting. Coming off the head kick knockout victory against Uriah Faber, this guy is all the rage right now. I think that personally, he'll probably be able to outwork Jose, probably similar to like Alexander Volkanovski, right? He was just able to pressure, avoid the big shots, keep inside, make Jose work. And I mean, of course, Jose is one of these guys where his cardio has always been one of his biggest weaknesses that people have been able to have tried to keen in on, and some have succeeded in doing so. And I think Petr will pull off a similar feat. What do you think?
Yeah, so again, similar to what you think. I do expect Jan to get the win. I do think that he can get a stoppage, maybe around 4-ish. I do agree. Aldo does seem to fade later into fights, and especially as he gets older, especially with having to cut an additional 10 pounds. I'm sure that doesn't help either. Although, like you mentioned, he doesn't look terrible doing it. He did have a very good fight against Moraes, obviously very close. In terms of striking, at this point, both Aldo and Jan are basically boxers. Neither of them throw a whole ton of kicks. I'm curious to see if we'll ever see Aldo throw leg kicks again. If you ever were going to, this would be the fight to do it for sure, to try and maybe stop some of the movement or slow down some of the movement of Petr Yan. One of the only thing that kind of has me wondering is that when you look at Aldo, you're talking about a guy who was like the featherweight champion forever and ever. He's fought, Connor and Max and Volkanovski and, the best of the best. Cub Swanson, Uriah Faber, Mike Brown in the early years, in the WC days. Jan's biggest wins have been against Uriah Faber and Jimmy Rivera. Those were his last 2 fights. And don't get me wrong, they're both good wins. But he hasn't fought like the elite of the elite. And I'm not saying Aldo is the elite of the elite anymore. But, he didn't have to fight Sterling, Sandhagen, Moraes, Cejudo, the guys that were at the top of the 35 division before getting this. So the only thing is that I expect Aldo to be very calm, very calculated, good game plan. And the only thing I somewhat worry about for Jan is that this will be new territory for him. It'll be against, a very, very decorated ex-champion who's still very much game. Faber, in my opinion, is, a little over the hill at this point. Aldo can still compete with the best of the best. So, from a experience factor, that's the only thing that kind of has me saying, well, maybe Aldo can pull it out. And I'll be first to admit, I'm an Aldo mark. Aldo's one of my favorite all-time fighters. So I would personally love, nothing more to see him take home a second title. But if, apples are apples and we're looking at everything evenly, I expect Jan to win the fight. I expect him to keep his foot on the gas. I expect him to wear Aldo out, and late in the fight, potentially maybe a decision, but maybe I think late in the fight, he can get the stoppage. So it hurts to say it because I love Aldo, but if in terms of where would I be putting my money, you got to go with Jan.
Yeah, no, good call. I we'll see what happens. I'd very much like to see Aldo just kind of, turn the clock Randy Couture style here in this fight. Be a sight to see. We'll see what happens. It's a great fight overall. No matter whether you think this is the fight that should happen for the title or not, it's a great fight. I can't wait to see it. The co-main event of the evening, Alexander Volkanovski, speaking of which, as aforementioned, will be defending the featherweight title against the man he beat to get it, Max Holloway. Now, I love the idea of a rematch here, but now I'm after watching Embedded, you see that there seems to be a sense of, I don't see what I did wrong the first time. Let's kind of go back to that well. And from Max Holloway, and he had an actual full fight camp before that first fight they had. And now Max Holloway has since admitted that he's not done a lot of sparring or any sparring at all, really. He's not trained with his coaches. He's just been doing everything from home in preparation for a fight against Volkanovski, who has absolutely been training still with very closely with his head coach. and his team. And so it's going to be interesting, to say the least, to see what Max Holloway does coming back here against a fighter that he did lose on the scorecards to. And I don't, I personally feel like he did lose that fight, and I haven't met really anybody that's ever told me, nah, Max definitely won that fight. It didn't seem like it was a controversial decision. A lot of people just thought, because of Holloway's dominance in that division, that merited the rematch, and I agree with that sentiment. But to say on Holloway's point, and I don't, you wonder even how serious he is. How serious is he about all this, that he's not been sparring, he's not been with his coaches, he's not done all these things. Meanwhile, of course, Volkanovski has stated he's taken it seriously. And I don't think, I find that there's a little bit of fault in Holloway's preparation coming in, but you never know. So I personally feel like if this is the case, if this is true, let's just assume that it is. I find that Volkanovski will probably have a more dominant showing this time around. Maybe still not a finish, but I think he probably takes 4, if not all 5 rounds here in this fight. What do you think?
Yeah, there are some Max truthers out there that will tell you that first fight was close. Not that Max won, but they'll say, oh, it was, a 3-2 and, maybe. And it's like, no. You could have given him 2 rounds potentially, but I mean, at the very, very most, you'd give him 2 rounds. I gave him 1 round. I think I gave him round 4 in their first fight. But
agreed.
Alex really controlled that fight from start to finish. If you look at the numbers, they'll tell you the story. He was, really beating Max up with leg kicks. One of the things I found, kind of interesting in kind of doing research on the rematch, and I had to revisit it, is that I always think of Max as the taller, longer fighter just because of the way that they both look. And Max is definitely taller. He's got 5 inches on Volkanovski. But Volkanovski has a 2-inch reach advantage, which is absurd. He's got some long ass arms for a guy that's 5'5". And when you think of his style, how it's that constant moving forward, shooting in on you and then coming over the top, it's not as easy as you might think with a smaller fighter, a shorter fighter, where if you're the taller man, you're jab, 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 right? Keep him away, knowing that he wants to get in on your hips. He didn't land a single takedown in their first fight, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he was able to get in on Max and make the fight a little bit ugly and not fight more at range, which is where Max is a little more comfortable. At range, Volkanovski was utilizing the leg kicks a lot more to close the distance. So I think Alex did a phenomenal job in the first fight. And like you said, if what Max is saying is true and he hasn't sparred, he hasn't trained with his coaches because of the lockdown in Hawaii, which they've been taking real seriously. I really don't like this fight for Max at all. We all know he's durable as shit. We all know that, it's not likely he'll be finished, but, I don't see very many ways he can win. I think that his style plays well into Volkanovski's style, and Volkanovski has made it, has kind of put everyone on notice the last couple of months. The ones that thought that maybe he didn't deserve to win the title, he was the one that asked for the rematch. He's the one that wants to finish Max, or at least beat him more definitively. So he's going in there with a lot to prove, even though he doesn't have to, in my opinion. But that added, momentum that he's kind of gathered behind himself and being able to train with his team. Yeah, I'm not loving this fight for Max. So again, it's much like the Aldo fight. I love Max, right? I love Max as a fighter. He reps 11th Island or 10th Island, which is Canada, Toronto. But yeah, it's a real tough matchup for him given the circumstance surrounding.
Yeah, agreed. It'll be interesting to see. I very much have jumped on the bandwagon here for Alex after the Mendez win. And so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. I'm a big fan of both guys, though. You can't not love Holloway. He's one of the best humans in the game. And so no matter what, I feel like whoever comes out on top will have earned it. And if it's Volkanovski, he's got an interesting reign ahead of him. And if Max somehow pulls this off, it's going to be, I think we'll probably see a trilogy. I don't feel like there's a lot of big featherweight names out there really like right there at the, like firmly in the number 1 contender spot. You know what I mean? So we might see a third fight if Max were to somehow win.
Yeah, they keep on trying to make the Korean zombie Brian Ortega fight. Yeah. They're trying to get it moving, and there's just between the injuries, between so bad, man. Yeah, and I'll be totally honest with you, I didn't like the fact that they gave Holloway the rematch. I'm not a fan of these automatic rematches, even if it's a long-standing champion, unless the fight really was close or was a bad decision or it was a disqualification, something like that. But in my opinion, they should have been
like Garbrandt. Like Garbrandt shouldn't have got a rematch after getting knocked out and never having defended the belt.
Right. And Max didn't look terrible in the fight against Volkanovski, but there was nothing that I saw in that fight where I was like, well, I think Max can redeem himself. I would have rather that they tried to give maybe Korean Zombie this fight, let Max fight somebody else, and then, get him a win or two, and then get him back up and in. But either way, it is what it is now. And I mean, no one's going to argue Holloway and Volkanovski is a great fight. It's just me personally, I'm not a fan, even with these long-standing champions, of these kind of automatic rematches.
Right. Well, with that, we move on to the main event. Now, let me paint you a picture here for me on my side of things. When I was watching the Ultimate Fighter team season, where it was Black Zillions versus Team ATT, yeah, I definitely stand for Usman after that show, during that show. I've been a fan of that man, and I said that man would be a future champion, and my God, you saw on our own page, a lot of people gave me shit about that. A lot of people thought, nah, and no, won't happen. He's too this, too that. He can't, he won't. After the fact, because he went on to defeat Colby Covington and has been a champion that people are like, wow, okay, this guy could, earn that best all-time status if given the right kind of opponents and title reign. And now he is here fighting one of the biggest stars in the UFC today, Jorge Masvidal. And it's not like he has the hardest job in doing so. Masvidal is taking this fight on 6 days' notice, 7 really, but 6 days' notice. I imagine that Masvidal has been training, he's been keeping in shape, and he's not too much overweight. He only has to lose, according to his coach, 18. Jorge himself said 20. And so he will be without Mike Brown. You pointed out before we started recording that Mike Brown actually has COVID and won't be cornering Jorge in this fight, which is unfortunate. And hopefully Mike Brown recovers and gets well. Man, I love both guys. I love the path that Jorge has been on. I've been watching the man for a long, long time, and I really have been excited to see how this last year has been for him. It's crazy that he's taking this fight on such short notice, but that really adds to his BMF status. And Usman gets a chance to really, highlight his skill, because Jorge is not an easy fight. Neither is Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns was a very difficult fight, and I feel like him and Jorge kind of mirror each other in the same sentiment, in that they're both great strikers, they're both great grapplers. It's Jorge himself. His grappling is incredibly underrated. He's not a submission machine like Burns is, but he scrambles really well. He knows how to fight off of his back. He knows how to make you work for everything that you do. And I can't think of a more exciting main event. I'm so glad that Jorge was able to get in on this fight, that the UFC was able to pay him stylistically. I feel like Usman does have the grappling advantage on the feet, man. I think Jorge is very fast. He's the faster man. He's got probably the better hands, where I would say, or the better kicks, where I would say that Usman has more knockout power, as opposed to Jorge, who's got the faster hands as well. There's a lot of fun little nitpicky things that we could do. Overall, though, I think Usman's grappling will make the biggest difference. I'm very excited for this main event. I hope it delivers. I don't see how it couldn't. And I think that somehow through some ill-gotten means, we have a main event that I think people are a little more excited for. And so for me, this is probably going to be one of the best welterweight title fights that we see in a long time. I'm incredibly excited for it. What do you think?
See, it's weird. I was on the other side. I actually would rather see Gilbert Burns fight Kamaru Usman, because I think stylistically he presents a tougher matchup. I think he has the physicality to deal with Usman, where I think that Masvidal may struggle. Usman's just a monster of a 170-pounder. And I agree, Jorge does have very good wrestling. He has good defensive wrestling. But I don't know if that'll stand up to a guy like Usman. I know that ATT did bring in a lot of wrestling training partners over the last few months to kind of get Masvidal ready. I think that they were kind of anticipating a potential fallout of either Burns or, or Kamaru in the main event. And I think he was kind of primed to step in. So it's funny because everyone's like, oh, he took it on 6 days notice, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, he did. But I'm like, I think he's actually been training this whole
probably
time.
a little ready. Yeah.
I think he's ready. And what makes it interesting, this is what makes it the most interesting to me, is that Usman left his training camp to go with Trevor Whitman, right, and Justin Gaethje to focus on Gilbert Burns, and Gilbert Burns stayed behind, with what's the name of the team? Sanford, I think it is. So, now Usman's been, given a different challenge, right? So the way that you were going to approach the Burns fight likely wasn't the same way you're going to approach the Masvidal fight. The Burns fight, I think that fight would have been, for the most part, a striking battle. I don't think Usman would want to chase too many takedowns. Burns off his back is just way, way, way too difficult to deal with, and he's really strong too. So I think he could have put, Kamaru in potentially some bad situations. But now you're going to fight Masvidal, and I think now you're going to switch up your game plan. Now you're going to see him, I think, doing a lot more wrestling. I think he's going to take less chances on the feet against a really crafty striker like Masvidal. I think if Usman is smart, he employs that Daniel Cormier versus Anderson Silva style. I don't think this is going to be an exciting fight, if I'm being honest. I think that Usman is just going to try and, keep the fight where he's most dominant. And I think he will be able to get it there. Maybe not right away, maybe not in round one, but Masvidal hasn't been training like he's been training for a world title fight. So I don't know about his gas tank. I don't know how much he'll be able to stop Usman's pressure. So in my opinion, Masvidal has to get this done early, round one, round two, if he wants a chance. I don't think you go out there and beat Usman on 6 days notice in a 5-round fight. I just don't see how it happens. But like I said, I think that it is kind of sneaky how Masvidal has been kind of preparing behind the scenes, and he's kind of giving you glimpses of it. So I personally don't think the UFC probably gave him close to what he was asking for. I think they gave him a bump, being that it was a short notice fight, but it doesn't make sense that they would pay him, argument's sake, 3 or 4 times what they were going to pay him 2 months ago. I just think that Masvidal, A, got more money than he was originally being offered, and B, kind of understood that this might be like a sneaky spot for him to get in and get Usman while he's kind of, disoriented because he's been training for Burns for the last 6 weeks. And all of a sudden, let's do a flip and let's see if we can kind of catch him slipping a little bit. So I still don't think that'll be enough to get it done, but Masvidal is going to have to really pull out his bag of tricks, really be mindful about not, loading up on punches, not getting themselves in situations where, Usman can get a hold of him. I think it's Usman's fight to win. But I was talking to someone online, and I said, think about the underdogs in the 3 title fights. Masvidal, Max Holloway, and Jose Aldo. How often do you bet against any of those 3 guys? And those 3 guys are, I believe, 3 of the top 4 or 5 underdogs on the entire card. I know Paige is a bigger underdog, and I think there is an undercard fight that is the bigger underdog. And besides those 2, the 3 title fights, those are the 3 biggest underdogs, which is crazy that you'd be betting against those guys, or at least be stacking the odds against them that heavy. But I agree with the odds makers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not 2000, not 2012.
No, man, time goes on, the torch gets passed, but man, the historical ramifications if Jorge can pull this off.
Huge.
Oh, huge. He will have done in 2 years the biggest lineup of fighters and achievements, that we've ever seen from somebody since Conor McGregor, maybe even before that. I mean, to win the BMF title, which of course we all look at and go, but then we go and it's he won the actual belt. Now he's got both of these belts, but they're 2 different belts, and he's gotten this litany of big names and talented names, to his resume, and to win the belt on top of all that. it'd be something, man. His career would have, Hall of Fame status right there and then. And I mean, you can already see him kind of getting towards that trajectory, but to beat Usman, to win the belt on this shorter notice, you damn near guarantee a spot.
Yeah.
I love this fight. I personally think we'll see a lot more excitement than you believe, but it'll be interesting to talk about it next week after the fact. UFC 251 Fight Island finally going down, and now I'm getting jitters. I'm getting excited just thinking about it. You know what I mean? Can't wait, Joe. I'm so excited to have gotten you back on here and talk and get another show in. But we will definitely be back next week to talk about UFC 251, a card I'm sure will deliver. And this is going to be a hell of a Saturday. We've been waiting for it for a long time based on everything that's been going on around us. It's something that the sports world is all looking forward to. Can't wait.
Yeah. Very, what was it, in Jacksonville where they did the Wednesday, Saturday card, or was that Vegas? I can't remember.
That was, yeah. No, it was Jacksonville all the way.
Yeah. So we'll have that coming up. We'll have the 11th is 251. Then you got the first Fight Island card, or not Fight Island card, but in terms of designation, on the Wednesday, the 15th. And then you've got 2 Saturday shows following. So I know we've been kind of offline for a little while, but we kind of knew that this, huge slew of fight cards was coming up. And I believe although we just kind of passed this week where there were no fight cards, I don't believe that there's another week without a fight card until Labor Day, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, there's going to be about 9 or 10 cards or so before another break. So that's why we kind of had to get a little refresh going and then obviously look forward to all the good stuff upcoming. But good to talk to you again. We'll definitely do a recap after the fact, and then we can kind of look forward to the rest of the Fight Island shows.
All right, brother. Good talking to you, fight fans. See it, 251 this Saturday. Don't miss it. And we will be back next week to talk about the rest of the lineups coming up. Love you guys. Can't wait to
take it easy. Bye-bye, everyone.